The future belongs to service providers who innovate without limits. That's why the fastest growing service providers are choosing the NetSapiens platform. Visit netsapiens.com.
Hey everybody, it's Doug Green and I'm the publisher of Technology Reseller News, and I'm very pleased to have with me today Bill Major, FiberLight CEO. Bill, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Doug.
Well, we're talking about a topic that I think was sort of for a while a kind of sleeper. We've always had data centers. We've always had data centers being built here and there. It's nothing new. Suddenly, as everyone knows, this has kind of exploded as an issue that seems to be popping up in every county you've never even heard of. Probably every part of your state by state, county. So we're going to be talking about that. But Bill, first of all, what is FiberLight?
FiberLight is a designer, constructor, and operator of a 100% fiber optic network. We do custom builds that are empowering AI and hyperscalers, neocloud. We serve enterprise businesses. We do fiber to the tower, and we interconnect with other providers, enabling interconnections. So we are anything that you need from a digital superhighway. That's what we do.
So I think as we were talking about just in the run up to our podcast today, there's a bit of a paradox. It reminds me of the cell phone era or the early cell phone era. Everyone wants one, everyone's using one, and nobody wants the towers.
Nobody wants it in their backyard. But as we have clearly seen over, call it the last 20 plus years, we're dependent on those things. Those
Right.
phones don't leave our hands. A lot of people carry two of them, one for work, one for personal. Back then it was the environmental impact, putting towers up. I didn't want to see a tower in my backyard. But now, customers aren't happy when they can't gain tower access and their phone's not working. So people are happy to have more and more towers. It's a very, very close correlation to what's happening in data centers.
Let's stay with that a second, because that was one where you could argue that as cell phone coverage and also cell phone usage, it wasn't ubiquitous at the beginning. As that kind of rolled out, maybe the benefits ran ahead or sometimes behind the impact on local. In other words, to your point, hey, it's great that there's a tower because I'm in touch.
Right.
And eventually people found, I'm happy to have these towers because it benefits me. So maybe the resistance faded. Is that what happened?
Absolutely. I mean, we are dependent. The resistance was the unknown. It was new, right?
Right.
And it was great. I remember I'm going to start aging myself. I was in college when I got my first cell phone, and you were paying, somewhere around 40 or 70 cents per minute. And it was great to say you had it, and it was if you needed it.
Right.
And now it's part of our daily lives.
Right.
The amount of screen time that, individuals use, and now with the evolution of AI, people are using their phones more than ever.
Well, yeah, let's transition there, because we use our phones. We use them for banking. We use them to get on an airplane. We use them to get the plane ticket, book it, actually check into the hotel before we get there and all that, right?
Correct.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, when we do that, we are in fact using a data center somewhere.
Everybody's using a data center. I've been in the telecommunications industry now nearly 30 years. And I remember when, servers were sitting in your office. Those days are over. Some companies, of course, have interior data centers that they own, but everything's now cloud. And where's the cloud reside? In these data centers.
It's a data center, right?
You got it.
So help me with this. So, on the one hand, we have the inertia of demand. We have the sort of inevitability almost of the development of these sites and so on. But it is a complex local issue. There's all of a sudden a wall of opposition. It's gone all the way up, as you were describing earlier. In some states, major states have issued moratoriums. It's become a hot political issue. And there's some complexity with regard to issues such as water use, water temperature, and so on and so forth, even noise pollution.
Correct. And right here in our home state, we're headquartered here in Dallas. Our governor came out on the third and put a brief pause.
Right.
I've been asked a lot about that. And, when I reflect, it's actually a smart idea. They took a moment to realize there's 470 gigawatts currently of interconnection requests in play right now. And, I wasn't here at the time. I moved down here in 2023, but there was a horrible winter storm that we all probably remember seeing on the news, and
Mm-hmm.
the grid, ERCOT, was unable to, sustain what that impact was. And people were without power for a couple of days. And I mean, it was a major impact. So by Governor Abbott pausing and really understanding what are those interconnection requests is a wise idea. We have plenty of land, we have plenty of water. People don't believe that, but there's plenty of water down here. And we've got the power, but we've got to be a little bit, careful of who's in line, what is going to be the power draw. And so, that's happening throughout the country. Other states have asked for moratoriums till 2029, hoping that this kind of subsides. But there's so much money that's been invested by NVIDIA, and others. Right now, they've got 60 billion plus committed to enable AI, and they've just raised another 500 billion that they are planning to put to work. So the data centers are coming. I just think the unknown has scared people, and there's a pause. These aren't nuclear reactors. These are brick and mortar data centers with, GPU, TPUs running to enable everything that makes our life convenient. You said, checking in on a flight,
Right.
booking the ticket, opening your hotel door. I turn on and off my power at the house, lights when I'm traveling. I mean, I use my phone to control what I'll call daily conveniences, and you need data centers to fuel that.
So let's, with, and you have a front row seat. You're saying that the hitting the pause button, kind of just temporarily, might not be such a bad idea in some places. But I'm kind of curious, will what's happening right now actually in the overall slow down the development and rollout of the data centers? And we'll start to talk about AI as well.
So, hitting the pause button is just those that haven't received their permits. There are data centers that shovels have been in the ground, and these take a couple of years to stand up. So, even though there's a pause, there's so much in flight, especially here in Texas and throughout Chicago, of course, Indianapolis, Columbus, Ohio, Virginia. Um, this pause isn't slowing down the amount of work. It's just being more cautious of what's next and where they're going to actually put these data centers. So, um, uh, to me, the pause is being responsible, but it's not an end to it. It's going to continue. And, this is something that data center developers we talk to have been anticipating, and that's why they're looking at alternatives behind the meter, self generation, similar to what they have done over at Stargate over in West Texas. There are other ways that they can get these data centers online, and they're going to find a way for sure.
So with that, and then of course we have AI layered on top of this, which is exponential demand for basically service. As I mentioned before, we have also the added challenge of the continuing rollout of EVs, that the demand on the power grid, and so on. You mentioned in the run up to the podcast, You said next generation data centers or next generation AI data centers. Is there something new that you're doing that makes these data centers maybe more efficient or better?
Well, personally, with us designing, constructing, and operating the fiber network, we're just the enabler, right?
Right.
Providing large cables, conduit systems, etc. But the as you look at all the chip stocks, they continue to soar, right? And the multiples on those companies are huge. Um, Ultimately, my belief is they are increasing the output and the compute of these chips, and next will be quantum. Data centers are evolving, but they're still a brick and mortar, and they still need a ton of compute. So eventually, quantum's going to shrink down the footprint you need, and you'll be able to put more and more compute in. But it's like any technology. To bring it back to the cell phones, Doug, because that's actually where I started my career, was selling cell phones. And I remember the old, Motorola brick phones, and then
Mm.
Qualcomm came out, and it was how do we get them smaller and smaller, and they got down to the StarTAC, and now we carry, these bigger, smartphones. The technology is going to continue to evolve in the data centers. You've heard SpaceX announced they want to put data centers in space, and who knows? Maybe not in my lifetime, but I'll be watching.
Well, let's talk about something we don't hear a lot about in this debate, which is fiber. Tell me about what's changing there.
Well, when you think of .com, when the telecom and .com bubble burst, well,
Yep.
nearly 30 years ago now. It seems like yesterday, but there was a ton of companies putting new fiber plants in, and then all of a sudden they became, exhausted because the capital spends.
Right.
What's changed is not many new long haul routes, and with AI, they need to be able to get these models distributed. So there are, hyperscalers, neocloud, and others that are demanding these robust builds. So typically, when you build fiber, you have a conduit and a cable. Nowadays, we're building what are called duct banks that have multiple conduits in it. And these hyperscalers and neocloud for these LLMs are demanding large cable sizes, 864 strands dedicated to them, dedicated to their models. The evolution will be, I believe, as agentic becomes reality more and more, that's going to force the distributed model to get closer to the edge. So we're going to see an evolution that maybe they won't be large megawatt, gigawatt data centers, but you'll have smaller edge data centers because of the distributed access. And of course, our demand as human beings, once we really take a liking to technology, like we talked about, they're going to want it their way right away, and it's going to be critical. So that is enabling us to continue to add density in our fiber networks, which to me, has a impact across everyone, because where once it was a rural area, now we're building this dedicated network. We can offer middle mile and ultimately first mile access to fiber to the home providers, wireless ISPs, school districts that uh, weren't able to get access to 100 gig, 400 gig backbones. So it has a really broad effect, and we continue to add, hundreds of miles each month.
You know, Bill, I think since Cisco Live, that was early June, a few months ago.
Mhm.
The word I hadn't before that, I hadn't heard the word infrastructure that often. Sure heard AI a lot, agentic AI all the time. All of a sudden, infrastructure is back in fashion. Even companies that had been cloud, 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 all of a sudden have been saying infrastructure. So, am I picking up on a trend that you're seeing also?
Absolutely. Infrastructure not only includes fiber networks, but the data center buildings. And, infrastructure is a very broad sector. I recently was quoted saying, fiber operators like FiberLight are back in vogue. Fiber to the home really kind of took prime stage. But right now, because of the enterprise businesses, the consumers, and the demand for broadband or data, ultimately infrastructure is critical. As data, I mentioned earlier, Doug, we talk to data center developers. And one of the, I'll call it an edict for data center developers is to ensure that fiber infrastructure is in place prior to their single tenant taking occupancy, because speed to market is critical right now as we
Right.
continue this race for AI dominance. And that's why I believe it's not going to slow down. It's just the demand is so high.
Bill, as we close up our podcast today, I wonder if you wouldn't mind giving us some tea leaf reading. You sit kind of in a very interesting front row seat to the rollout of AI and data centers and so on. Anything you can tell our readers about what maybe you're picking up on that they should know about?
Absolutely. This won't be anything earth shattering. I always say I wish I had a crystal ball. I actually, upon the acquisition of FiberLight back in 2023, I looked at the fiber we had in West Texas that was built for fiber to the tower, actually. And I was concerned on how we monetized it. Well, we found out quickly with the announcement of Stargate. Um, I didn't have a crystal ball because that one showed up without me knowing. But, you know, again, these data centers, they're no different to me than a shopping mall. Yes, there is some noise. I don't believe, that I want one next to my house, but I also would be happy about 5 years from now having that data center next to my house, because as we adopt and get familiar with the actual benefits of AI and how it can improve how we perform, day to day at work, how we, live our lives. We're going to be more and more dependent on it, Doug. And I don't believe, again, with recent news, I don't believe this slows down. If you picked up any interviews I did last year, I predicted second half of 28, this was going to slow down.
Hmm.
The conversations I'm having right now with the developers and hyperscalers, this isn't slowing down in 2028. So it's a once in a lifetime generational opportunity for businesses, for tradesmen, etc. And once we adopt what AI can really do to make our lives better, we're going to lean in, no doubt in my mind.
And maybe to the example you have given us with the cell phone towers, there was a lot of invention that occurred. There was a lot of adoption. All that huge influx of cash and demand sort of signaled to the market, "Hey, invent solutions." And there was a lot of inventiveness.
And AI's creating that opportunity once again. There's going to be, you I continue to read, everybody's worried that AI's taking their jobs. Well, when something happens like this, a new technology, um, new jobs are created. Something next is going to follow. And I'm excited to be part of it. And like you said before, Doug, I do have a front row seat, and I've enjoyed where I'm sitting and definitely participating and impacting what's going on today.
Well, Bill, I really want to thank you for joining me today and sharing these insights. Ongoing story. So I hope we get to do this in a few months. Thank you very much indeed.
Doug, appreciate it. Great time. Thank you.
Innovate without limits, scale without compromise, and never pay per seat again. Discover why providers choose netsapiens.com.